right, and we are live. Welcome to the Left Wing. Once again, I am John Cooper here with a very special guest, kind of a curveball. We usually have purely political content creators who may do some other things. Timothy Lee Peterson here, he does some other things really well and has been really popping off on Threads. At least that's how I found him with a lot of his political posting. So, Tim, how about you just give the audience a brief introduction to who you are and kind of why you started talking about all this stuff online?
Yeah. First thing, thanks for having me. My name's Tim. I think most of what I identify with is someone who does martial arts and teaches martial arts, specifically Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I started doing martial arts when I was about 4 years old, and I started Jiu Jitsu when I was a teenager. I went to UCLA for my undergraduate, and I was fortunate enough to also teach the Jiu Jitsu program there while I was doing my undergraduate. And so when it came time to graduate, myself and another individual who was also graduating decided to open a school together, and it was called Robot. And I ran that for about 12 years. We had MMA, jiu-jitsu, all the things you would kind of expect. And in 2020, I closed down during COVID and became more interested. I wouldn't say as active or engaged in social media, but I was very interested in politics in 2020 because I saw. Well, I mean, obviously you were alive at that time, so there were a lot of things happening in 2020. But moving forward, I during the election, or sorry, after the election, I was very kind of shocked. I think because I'm in California and I was pretty excited to see kind of a blue victory, but that didn't happen. And so I went online and just was trying to look for people and to connect with and talk to about this and be like, what did I miss? What was I not doing? What could I have been doing differently, et cetera? And that's when I came on Threads, because by that point, Twitter had become very, for a while, obviously, had been very right wing and things like this. So I decided to give Threads a try. And I found a lot of interesting people there and started writing there more. And at first, I was writing mostly about what I love, which is jujitsu, but also some political frustrations that I was feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And that started to gain a little bit more traction. And, you have to understand the world I come from, the jiu-jitsu world, the MMA world, as you know, is very right-leaning, very MAGA leaning in a lot of ways. And despite the fact that I'm in California, I was in a place, I should say, that tended to be pretty conservative for California. So I was aware that there was a lot of support for things that I wasn't necessarily a fan of, but I didn't think that it was as widespread across the country to give Trump a victory in the election. So anyhow, I was looking for people because I was pretty sure that there were people in jiu-jitsu that were not so straightforwardly supporting Trump. And I started to find some people. I connected with some people who I had taught at UCLA on Threads, things like this, and started writing there more. And then recently, Charlie Kirk was obviously shot and killed, and there was a lot of there was a sense of frustration met with hypocrisy that a lot of people felt about the attitudes towards gun violence and the acceptability of guns. And somebody who was essentially a champion for those kinds of things being shot and killed. It's something that if you put in a movie, would just seem outrageous. And there was a lot of kind of inflammatory, maybe not inflammatory, but there was a lot of caustic insults that were thrown from both sides, and a lot of feelings were hurt and things like this. And as I mentioned, I teach jiu-jitsu. That's what I've done professionally my whole life. It's what I love to do. And when you talk to my students, or you work with me or whatever it is, I think they would tell you that it's pretty surprising to hear me write and talk about the things that I was. And I did that on purpose. I did that because I know that this kind of language is effective at riling people up and making them pay attention to things. And since Columbine, I've been kind of disgusted with how just blasé so much of the political right in the United States is towards gun violence, and will wear assault rifle pins while people are giving speeches about mourning their kids that were just shot. And so I knew that this was a moment that just put that hypocrisy front and center on the stage. And there were people who felt a need to come out and defend a celebrity, and therefore then defend all of his ideas that came with it. And you saw other people who said, it doesn't matter if he's a celebrity. In fact, his ideas were pretty repugnant. And in fact, his ideas are what led to things like this, not because he made this happen, but because it's the kind of influence that that propagates these ideas. And he was a very, I don't want to say it's not poetic in any way, it's horrific, but it's one of those things that just aligns in a way that's really shows how you can want guns all the time until one is shooting you. And then it's just so clear, like, oh, obviously I would prefer that not happen. And it's like, no, what's crazy is there's other people who are like, I would also like that to not happen. And none of us even have to get shot for me to say that to you. And in my own community and around a lot of the people that I would see day to day, they were understandably kind of horrified that I was writing these things. And I knew that that was going to happen. And as I was saying, I did it on purpose because now I've essentially stopped. Because it is something that I have within me. It's not a lack of capability. It's not a lack of having teeth. It's just a lack of desire to talk to people like this. But what I found is that people that support MAGA in large part have begun worshiping someone who only knows how to behave this way and knows no other method other than to bully people and to insult them and to call them names. And I was like, for 20 years, for 15 years, I've put lessons on YouTube where I don't do that to people. For 20 years, I've taught people jujitsu and I don't do that. But I'm in an environment where it's so easy for me to do that. I could easily you understand this. I could, you could crush everybody on the mat and just leave them in the dust, but that's not what interested me. What interested me was seeing people learn jujitsu. They discover within them something that was always there, but now they're literally empowered with something that most of what just changed was like in their nervous system. And so I have this deep appreciation for human beings and our ability to learn and our ability to adapt and change. And what I found is that now when I change back, everyone that follows me on Threads is like, oh, awesome. Like your dog is so cute and like, looks like you're having a great day. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not because I'm just always soft on the edges and stuff like that. It's because I don't like to be this way, but I will be this way to have a positive effect. I will talk shit about whoever I want because I'm not beholden to anyone else's opinion. I'm beholden to, my own opinion of myself and how I respond to these kind of events. And so that's the longest introduction I've ever given, but it might be one of the more thorough ones. So thank you for listening to all of that.
No, of course. A lot you touch on there, which is a lot of the things that we're going to get into with this show, from the rising tensions and political violence in this country, how that's related to, as you mentioned, the sort of rhetoric and style of politics that Charlie Kirk, Donald Trump, and the current MAGA movement represent. And we're going to be talking also about the Dallas shooting that happened yesterday, how that's related into all of this. But let's start in your home base here to get you comfortable and talking about a subject that probably more intimately. And that's what you mentioned with something that really stood out to me is jujitsu. Jiu-jitsu and combat sports in general tend to have a pretty right-wing bias. And by the way, guys, Tim was being very humble. He doesn't just teach jiu-jitsu. Everyone who teaches jiu-jitsu and has a gym is very good, don't get me wrong. But this guy's a national champion. He teaches he's at the highest level of the sport. And so he's been around. He knows a lot of people in the sport. And it's not just jiu-jitsu. It's, from my background of wrestling, I do jiu-jitsu as well, for those who don't know. If you go into a boxing gym, you go into an MMA gym, you are going to be, really any gym, you're probably going to be surrounded by majority right-wingers, which I have always found interesting, because the way I got into martial arts from a young age was Mr. Miyagi. It was Yoda. It was these wise, be kind, talk calmly, and walk with a big stick kind of uh, role models, right? And that kind of pacifist philosophy I always found to be an integral part of martial arts. And yet you step into a martial arts gym, and that is not often what you find. It's even if the professor or the instructor teaches, hey guys, don't actually attack people, only use this in self-defense. the mentality of a lot of the people in the gym tends to be a little bit more meat-headed, to say the very least, right? And I've always found that to be so interesting because I don't know how I could do what I do without that kind of basis in my own philosophy and ideology around martial arts and getting on a mat and saying, "Hey, I'm going to try and kill you, and you're going to try and kill me, and let's trust each other to not actually do it." And there's a level of intimacy in that that can really lead to positive masculinity and growth in relationships. And I just often see the opposite happens. It tends to be a place where the more toxic sides of masculinity can flourish. And I'm not talking about every gym, I'm not talking about every practitioner, but it's more common than it isn't. And I was wondering, have you ever had that same sort of thought as someone who
Almost
probably is cut from the same
nonstop.
cloth as me?
Almost nonstop.
Mhm.
I think a lot about this a lot. There are a lot of different ways we can dig into this. I think it would be quite interesting to do so. Um, probably the best place to start Probably the best place to start is, if you don't mind, if I could talk to you about Rene Girard and mimetic theory for a moment, as well as
Mhm.
one of the topics we wanted to get into, because I think jujitsu is actually almost a perfect model for understanding how this works. So Rene Girard was a teacher and a philosopher of literature. He's a French guy, and he wrote a lot about at first plays and Shakespeare and things like this. And what he was trying to understand was like, why do Shakespeare plays have something kind of different that makes them transcend just a normal story that one of us might tell? And this is where he started. What he comes to realize is that, let's say you have a man, and this man loves some woman, let's just say, and this man loves this woman and desires her. Now a second man comes in, and this man notices not the woman, but notices the other man and notices his desire for the woman. And this second man begins to desire the woman as well. He begins to create in his mind reasons why she's desirable because he notices the first man desire her. He
Mhm.
then begins to imitate the first man to try and be the attractive, desired thing by the woman. But the issue can be that the first man and the second man now have conflict. And that conflict comes from them seeking basically the same identity. And what Gerard said was, well, when this happens with two people or three people or 100 people, you eventually get conflict in society. You get a lot of stress on society. And he argued that one of our first sort of social technologies was this idea of scapegoating. The idea that if I were to put all the blame for something, even if it doesn't make any sense, on some person, and then we expel that person, the problem will be attributed to having gone away because of this. The classic example is witch burning, which would
Mhm.
be something like, it doesn't, we burn these witches, the crops don't grow any better. We burn
Mhm.
these witches, the sun is still coming up the same number of hours a day. What Girard eventually gets to is this notion that, well, you can't burn witches forever. Eventually, what happens when you scapegoat enough and it doesn't work, if the society sticks together, you're eventually going to look into the natural world and go, why do the crops not succeed? Oh, it's this thing called fertilizer. We got to use fucking fertilizer. That's gonna help. But coming back to Gerard's original idea, the idea is essentially that when we desire something, it's very rarely that we reasoned our way into this desired position. I don't know about you, but when I got an iPhone, I wasn't like, oh, look at the specs. It was because somebody showed me one and I was like, that's kind of amazing. And I actually thought that this person was kind of smart and like they thought it was cool. So maybe I'll check it out. And so what Gerard would argue is that what we tend to do is we find people that have what we'll call status or are in a role model or a model position in society. Maybe an influencer position would be more modern way of phrasing it. And we tend to imitate the things that we do because we think that doing so will allow us to achieve the same results that they do. And this is actually a really good thing because as human beings, it would be such a waste of time for me to recapitulate all of jujitsu to learn it myself when I could just copy what someone else is doing for now. And then maybe eventually I'll kind of circle into my own understanding of it.
Mhm.
And so Girard is saying, well, we look to these models because it's very efficient. But the devious thing is that when models recommend other models, we very quickly take those other models on board. Let's imagine a person whose name is Ro Jogan, right? I don't know, something like that. And Ro Jogan likes to bring people on his podcast. And a lot of people like Ro Jogan because he's been doing this for a super long time, right?
Mhm.
And they find him to be someone that's kind of like them and they can kind of admire things about him. He works out and blah, 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 blah. And so they take on board some of his opinions and some of the things he likes. For example, almost all the people that I know in jiu-jitsu for some reason love bow hunting and eating all of a sudden, but it's because they're imitating this model. Now that model, Rojogan, brings someone on who everyone in the room and everyone watching knows a little bit less on this specific topic than this one person. And that person comes on and spouts a bunch of ideas and doesn't really get challenged because there's not a technical expert to provide that pushback. And people start adopting those ideas. And I think this is essentially what you have with a lot of guruism, a lot of grifting and things like this, is latching on to a particularly well-respected and admired model and having them bolster you so that their trust is conferred to you. And then you can then push whatever agenda you have, right? Now, why am I, this is kind of obvious when I think I talk about Rojogan, but the systems of jiu-jitsu are actually almost perfect for this as well. Because imagine now you're a white belt and you come into a jiu-jitsu class and you're not really sure what to do, but everyone else is wearing these different color belts. And when I first started, I was like, does purple come before blue, or is it blue? But black belt, now that's the end of the line. So me as a white belt, I don't know what to do. At least I know I can go ask the black belt, and they should know what to do. So we have a model for me to look to and begin to imitate. And what you said earlier was really interesting, because a lot of these models that are black belts will talk. Where am I? I'm over here. That will talk about, here's what you should do, and every day work so hard and things like this. But what do they model for people to imitate? Right? Do what I say, not what I do, it's kind of a poisonous saying for a reason. I think a lot of the reason, to come back to what you actually asked, why you see a lot of right-wing MAGA influence in right-wing spheres has a partial historical reason, which I'll talk about in a second, and then also is propagated through this mimetic iteration of people that talk to each other and essentially defer opinions to upper belts on topics that have no relevance to jiu-jitsu. For example, if you remember when Eddie Bravo used to talk about the earth being flat and he knows nothing about any of these things, but because he was a black belt that Joe Rogan brought on, his ability to have expertise in one area was misinterpreted as potential expertise in other areas. And some people, like, I don't know if you know about Elon Musk, if you've ever heard of that guy, but he also tends to conflate his expertise perhaps in one area with other ones. And other people, I think maybe myself and you, who maybe lean a little more progressive, go, there are actual experts about all these topics. And I love to engage with them. I love to ask them questions. I love to learn about their expertise. But for me to pretend that I haven't and then to provide some sort of insight about it is actually quite disingenuous. And I think damages my own reputation as a model for jiu-jitsu. When I start talking about things that are well beyond my expertise, I go, hey, this is kind of what I think, but this is about the limit of my knowledge, So to come back, there's a historical element to this as well. And it's very, very interesting because not a lot of people know about this. In 1993, that was the year that the first UFC and the Netscape Navigator were available to the public, the same year, okay, but several months apart. And the UFC, if you remember, used to be in the section of the video store with the beads on it that you weren't supposed to go into because it had the boobs, right? Remember that? And I remember being a kid, I go to the video store and I'm like, I don't care about breasts, but I care about fucking fighting for sure. That's what I want to see. And so I think a lot of people that are around my age that got into jiu-jitsu, bought whatever, the first few UFCs, Pride, whatever. I'm watching them. I'm very interested because I thought striking and fighting was punching and kicking. And it turns out there's this skinny kid who's just strangling everyone and breaking their arms and doing stuff that just does not look intuitive. It's very hard to comprehend what's going on at first. But then you go to jiu-jitsu class and you start to learn. And you start to feel like you're gaining almost occult knowledge about something, where I have always had this skeleton, and yet now I'm using it to overcome someone who's so much larger than me. You feel like you have a channel into secret hidden knowledge. And you also have the Netscape Navigator. And so what happens in jiu-jitsu is there's a lot of jiu-jitsu champions who all of a sudden are in demand because Royce Gracie wins the first few UFCs in 1993. But a lot of these instructors, unfortunately, don't speak English very well. And so the only way to find an instructor is to perhaps search online or in a phone book. But if you've won some medals, you can put that on a website. And you can become known as someone who's good at jiu-jitsu, even if I don't have the language yet to articulate that skill to you. So what happened in jiu-jitsu was people became very interested and wanted to learn it. But jiu-jitsu was a very young martial art. It was not codified like something like music or chess, where systems of notation exist to make explicit all of the knowledge that they're trying to teach you. And so jiu-jitsu was learned by imitation. And you'll recall perhaps that old magazines used to have photos demonstrating an omoplata, where step 1, 2, and 3 of the omoplata, you're like, that's easy. And then step 4, you're like, how did that happen? How did step 3 become step 4? That didn't make any sense to me. And we all were learning jiu-jitsu from people who were also learning English. And you see this in the lexicon for jiu-jitsu, the arguments over naming. You see this over methods in teaching that have not been established yet as most effective and best practices. And you see people that came from a history of, look at this occult thing I got into and look how popular it is now. I must be good at discovering secret hidden knowledge. So now when Ro Jogan goes on his podcast, and Ro Jogan also does jiu-jitsu, well, we both have much more in common than I thought. Ro Jogan also knows about UFOs and extraterrestrials and all these other things that I take on board, because only an insane person would also do jiu-jitsu and have insane ideas, right? But no, it's simply that people were in an art that was very young and was never formalized in a way that you would do in a more academic setting, or if it had existed for a long period of time. And so they, I think, understandably in many ways, were on the frontier of a martial arts revolution, where what was thought of as effective was shown to not be. And the established institutions of martial arts crumbled in a single event, the first UFC. And no coincidence that UFC is still now a cathedral, essentially, of right-wing influence. But it started as, just like someone like Jesus would have been treated, like as almost hidden knowledge. And the people that were the original prophets and proselytizers now feel like they have access to knowledge that you and I just simply don't understand. We don't understand that the existing institutions are also corrupt in government, just like they were in martial arts. But what they don't understand is the development of jiu-jitsu historically was very, very different than the development of the history of the things that we've been born into, like systems for chess, systems for music, systems for government and legislation have existed before, long before we did, obviously. And yet the disconnect between those two, I think, is something that is what you were asking originally. Sorry.
No. It's all very interesting, and that's a very good history lesson for the uninitiated. We don't necessarily talk about, the history of jiu-jitsu too much on this show, but there is something that you mentioned, sort of, you were dancing around it there, and it's this, that mimicry, right? That is something that definitely appeals to a lot of people in jiu-jitsu, because that is how we learn. We just, we can watch as many instructionals online or whatever as we want, until you get on the mat and you start feeling it and you start actually doing with another person and mimicking what they do, you're not actually going to know what you're doing, right? And that sort of learning process, especially in a martial arts setting, in a jiu-jitsu setting, where it's already kind of naturally hierarchical. Not only do you have people of varying skill levels, but you also have a belt system in, depending on what gym you're at, what martial arts studio you go to, there might be a very strict hierarchy. If you ever do like Tung Sudo or something, where you're bowing and saying yes sir, and it's all about that sort of martial discipline, and I think that is part of what makes combat sports appeal to a lot of right-wing men in particular, because right-wingers are more hierarchical, left-wingers are more egalitarian. I think most people would agree with that. And as you said there with mimetic theory, we do mimic things. I enjoy mimetic theory because Rene Girard, right? Rene Girard, that was his name. It's one of those things where I think that he personally focuses way too much on this one theory of everything and uses it to apply to everything else. So it leaves holes in his philosophy. But that one theory of everything is pretty good. He thought of this before we knew that there are pathways in our brains specifically heightened for us to mimic other people. It's one of the reasons that humanity has exploded. A, we were able to sweat and outrun everything in existence. And B, we were able to empathize with other people. We were able to mimic them. We were able to learn quickly from other people by just watching them do things and copying them. we're very, very good at that. It is actually scientifically and evolutionarily how we learn to learn. And when you put that in a setting where you're learning from the person who can kill you, who's beating the crap out of you on a daily basis, sometimes you get this very, I don't want to say like God complex, but we definitely see instructors in martial arts that have a God complex, and we have their students who kind of follow them in a this person can do no wrong sort of environment. Like you said with Eddie Bravo, people hear Eddie Bravo and they're like, oh, he's got to be a smart guy. He's really good at jujitsu. This is really hard for me and it's easy for him. So he's got to know his shit. And then he starts talking about flat eartherism. And it's like, oh, well, maybe he's onto something. Eddie Bravo knows a hell of a lot more than I do. Maybe it's onto something. And because you trust that person already, you're more likely to mimic them. And I do think that's a large part of why you see that. However, I would say left wingers do that too. Like mimicry is not a right wing thing necessarily. Like adherence to hierarchy is, but we mimic. It's just part of our human DNA. And so, what do you think particularly appeals to the right wingers when it comes to things like martial arts, UFC, jiu-jitsu?
Yeah. So a couple things came to mind. One is that I think that left and right both respect hierarchy, but different ones. I think on the left, we tend to respect academia and education and things that I think are pretty well reasoned for why we would respect them. It's not you simply should, but it's, you obviously understand this point. I think on the other side, the egalitarian part of the right is something like a church. And I think I know, right? Because, but the thing is like, why does it work? Why, it's because there's a lot of lip service to the teachings of someone like Jesus, right? Which I think is what frustrates people about something like religion. But they call it a desire to bring everyone in. And I think sometimes the problem on the left is a desire to find a reason to expel a person. And it's not to say you don't need reasons or there's never legitimate reasons to expel people. But just like with sending someone to prison, it's important to have a method of reforming them and reintegrating them into society. And I think that sometimes the left is of a mind of wanting to excise people in the hopes that by excising all the wrong people, the remainder will be perfect. But the remainder will simply be focused on the rivalries that now exist within them. And on the right, I think they're very consistently at least acting like they're going to bring everyone in. But I think the nefarious part is they're going to bring everyone in to organize the pyramid exactly how they want it to be. And that, right. And I think so it's like they both are doomed in ways because of their own tendencies, and they both should be respected in certain ways for their tendencies. And I don't claim to be any sort of centrist at all. I'm very much a progressive. I think that a progressive person can integrate all of the good parts from the right wing and leave the dead wood behind. I think that the right wing is so married to dogmatism that they cannot shed anything that is even slightly controversial, but might help the overall movement and effectiveness. But that's why they also need to reinforce these strict hierarchies where no one can question the people above them, because it allows for a sort of ruthless efficiency of ideas to propagate. And I think that's why it's so easy for a right-wing scandal to get forgotten about, because the talking points are disseminated and, we just don't care. We literally don't care about a bribe caught on film. We literally are going to say that. And we forgive them, and Jesus forgives you. And it's like the forgiveness part is great, but the person must exhibit grace. And on the left wing, it's like, if you keep cutting everything in half, eventually you don't have enough to cut in half anymore, and you have nothing to work with. If we truly believe in education, it's not about cutting people out. It's about cutting people and putting them in an environment where they can maybe learn why working together is actually what we're supposed to be striving for. I think that's one item of it. I think another is when we do imitate someone, we're not usually comfortable with simply resting on that notion that, I admire you and I like what you do and I'm going to kind of copy you. What we then do is we look back and we go, and it was a good idea for me to copy you because obviously you've had so much success. Why would I not? And the way you speak is very gentle with people, and I like that, and I'm going to adopt. And so I rationalize why I've copied you after I've copied you.
Yeah.
You know, if I don't rationalize copying, all the motherfuckers who led me astray, all the, you know, all the people that are like, oh, you should only listen to this album forever. And I'm like, I love Deloused in the Comatorium by the Mars Volta.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not like for maybe 3 years in college, I'll only listen to that album. But you know what I mean? And so I think there's I think that, I hate this phrase, but I think that both sides have things that they can learn in order to be more effective. Obviously, I want a progressive side to be more effective. And I think that when you exhibit these things in jiu-jitsu, people are incredibly receptive to it. So one example, or maybe a couple examples, when I'm teaching somewhere, I always work with the student and make sure that they have success doing the technique on me. I've been doing it long enough though, when I spar with other black belts, I win almost every round with almost every black belt, unless they were the world champion. And I'm not saying but I've done it long enough. And so you can start to constrain somebody so that they are not able to do anything except the thing you've had them work on. And then they have success with it. And they're like, you gave me that. And I'm like, I'll give it to you a little bit less this time. And then they have success again. And now they're like, not only could I imitate you, but I could become more of me in a way. I could become myself, but like a little bit more developed in a way that you're teaching me. And again, like the emphasis not being, I'm so good and I'm going to beat you, but you're so good, just not like yet, like you're going to be better tomorrow. And let me show you how good you are right now though. Because what you don't know is all the change that happens in you when you get to black belt in jiu-jitsu is in your nervous system. Very little, like your ears, you know, like that, but most of it's here. And so on day one, you can throw a very heavy person. And if I show you that, you'll be like, oh, not only does this guy know jiu-jitsu and I could imitate that and learn it, but this guy wants me to succeed. And maybe I could imitate that too. And now this is really good for a school. This is very healthy because now a third student comes in, a fourth student comes in, and it's me and this person who I've been working with who now believes I could show these third and fourth students what Professor Tim showed me. And now they will develop into, you know, and I think you see this in healthy schools. A lot of people want to become instructors and they want to teach jiu-jitsu because we really love to share the things that change us. We love to share those things with other people. It could be a book, it could be a video game, it could be jiu-jitsu, but we love to share those things with other people. And I think the way human beings share things very naturally is to teach them, to describe how that experience took me from where I was to more of where I am now. Sometimes I think the right wing feels a bit offended by this because the left emphasizes the value of education and certification and diploma so much that they'll dismiss people that they're talking to on the right wing for making errors. But these are all learned things. These are all things that people learn. Instead of taking an approach where it's more of an invitation to, hey, I understand what you would call conservative beliefs. I don't actually think that the way government works is the best way to express those values. I think actually it has to maybe be this more sort of progressive approach, something like that, and kind of inviting the person in to succeed in their ideas with you, like I would with teaching someone to throw me first, rather than showing the other person how good I am at jiu-jitsu and crushing them and hoping somewhere that they are like, oh yeah, I could learn that. Like just demolishing someone intellectually and academically, and then being like, why are you not open to learning from me and being receptive to these ideas? Aren't they so warm and welcoming? And then they go to a church and they're like, I don't care if you are literally smoking crack on the way in. I am here to help you. You know what I mean? Like there's something about that where it's like when people need help, they don't come to you really prepared.
Yeah.
That's what needing help fucking looks like. You know what I mean? And it's like, so bring them in first and adapt. If you're so smart and so developed as a progressive person, you should be able to learn how to bring them in. Don't expect them to be ready at the door. And then you go, why aren't you walking through? And just, it's like, you have to, the white belt wears the white belt out of humility. The black belt wears a black belt out of responsibility, out of a duty to bring. It's not enough for you to be a white belt and have an okay class. You have to get to black belt. You have to, for me to be a good teacher. You have to get better than me, right? If it took me 25 years to learn something and it took you 25 years to learn it, I was just making the French fries for you to eat, right? That's not useful. It should take you 5 years if I can explain things well. And then it's a research program. Now we're both black belts, and you're going to have a specialization that I don't really do all that much because I do my thing, and I'm going to ask you about it, and we're going to learn together. And that's where the rigor comes in. That's where the intellectual, the academia, the needling people, you and I could do that, right? You and I could, but when you want to bring people in, you cannot disqualify them immediately because they don't have a diploma. And I think that on one side, and then the other side is like, look, dude, we're all children in the eyes of God. Jesus died for our sins. Brother, it's going to be okay. Go ahead and jump on in. Let's figure this out. And then it later becomes kind of poisonous and toxic, this sort of right-wing attitude, I think, because, well, don't ask a lot of questions about why we are sending all those people to that other country. Don't challenge, there is some poison in there. But I think that it's not because people are stupid that this happened, right? People don't smoke cigarettes because they don't know they're bad for you. They're addicted to them. And it's unfortunate. And people know to eat healthy food and to exercise, but it's challenging. There's a lot of resistance. It's not a lack of knowledge or information. It's not a lack of logical skills and reasoning. It's a lack of models that imitate the proper way to express those values in the world. And a lack of a model always points towards remaining models, so that whatever's left on the battlefield, people are going to imitate. And when someone gets on the battlefield by insulting and bullying people, people are going to insult and bully people. And then other people are going to see that and be like, I guess that's the kind of shit we're doing now, right? I mean, maybe I'm missing something very obvious, but I think about this all the time when I'm teaching. Like every time I engage with kids or adults or someone who is not like me and is maybe like, it's really hard for them to come to a jiu-jitsu class and they were so brave to like come in for their first day. But I started before I even knew, algebra. Like I have so much respect for people that come to their second jiu-jitsu class, because your first one, you didn't know. You had no idea you were going to get cooked. But your second one, man, that's really admirable. That's the kind of thing like I miss about someone like Jordan Peterson, was he would emphasize that. Like, it's so respectable that you're challenging yourself. It's not easy. But then it would be like, but there's no follow-up to that about accepting the person throughout that entire process. And I think that's where you see someone like Jordan Peterson kind of go astray. But bringing it all back, I think that this dichotomy in their institutions, one maybe being represented by a church and one maybe being represented by a university or academia, they have their pluses and minuses, but I think a lot of times the frustration comes from the unaccepting nature of the institutions on the left, and the welcoming nature on the right tends to scoop them up. And then later on, we see some of the downstream problems.
It's so funny. You talked about there a few things that I very much related to, particularly teaching by restricting your student to make them do the things they want, not going and just bashing them. The fact that you can do that to black belts, what I do to white belts, makes me scared of you. But the point is, that's an effect. Oh, holy shit. It just really started raining outside. That's the way you teach, right? And I actually find it very interesting because I feel like everything you said there, even the person coming to the gym for the first time and then the second time, I say that all the time. I've been doing this shit since kindergarten. I've never walked into a jiu-jitsu gym, even when I started my first day doing jiu-jitsu, and been the worst person in that gym. It's never happened to me. I can't remember, or maybe it did in kindergarten. I can't remember it, right? I've always been better than someone. The guy that walks in and gets his ass kicked by everyone, not just the first class, not just the second class, but usually it takes at least 3 months for them to have their first win in the gym. I always have mad respect for that person. And I could tell already you would too. Like we are kind of cut from that same cloth. And the interesting thing is, I feel like those sort of mentalities of bringing, as you said, bringing people in, building them up, helping them, being there for your teammate, being there for your brother. When they fail, you are there for them. When they succeed, you are there to cheer them on. All of these things are pretty universal within combat sports. And you also mentioned Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is someone who...
Sorry, go ahead.
Rogan, that's right. Different podcaster. But that's someone who, like a lot of dudes that we're talking about right now, kind of flip-flops. They kind of ideologically, he jumps around quite a bit. And I talk about it all the time. In 2020, he was a Bernie bro. 2024, he's Donald Trump. For someone who is in the world of politics, immersed in this shit every single day, that seems weird, especially for the people on the left. Like, how the hell can you go from Bernie fucking Sanders to Donald Trump in 4 years? That doesn't make sense. But the things that you're talking about here are kind of that. It's that the people around Donald Trump and the way Donald Trump is, they're people that dudes want to mimic. You know, Jordan Peterson. I actually like Jordan Peterson more than a lot of people on the left on certain subjects. He's one of those guys that if he gets out of his lane, he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, but he has certain lanes that he does give good advice in. And that is kind of what creates this. I don't know. Did you see that meme going around? It wasn't a meme. It was like a graph from a study. It wasn't the best study, but it had a good takeaway from it, where it was like right-wing viewpoints are all over the place and left-wing viewpoints tend to consolidate around a few things. And I think that kind of speaks to what you're saying. They bring anyone in. You know, they're not going to reject anyone to come in, right? They might bully certain groups. There might be certain groups of people. I mean, you talk to any woman who's in jiu-jitsu for long enough, she's had an experience at a gym that was not healthy for her to be at, right? You see this. But they're very accepting of everyone initially, whereas the left rejects, and doesn't allow people sometimes to build that level of understanding. I often say we on the left will have infinite patience for a black kid born to impoverished parents in the inner city committing crimes, and we recognize that, you know, them committing crimes, as much as it is partially a personal choice, is also a result of the systems they were raised in. But we don't give that same level of grace to a right winger who was raised in a super conservative Christian household in the middle of Kansas and doesn't know any and wasn't ever exposed to any other ideas. We don't have that same level of grace. We cut them off. And so I guess my question to you then, and you kind of touched on this, but I'd like to hear more of your opinion on it. How would you say for people like you and me? Now, you have your own gym and you are, and I instruct at a gym, but that's a totally different thing, right? But like for anyone who's in combat sports, any man who's in an environment where they're surrounded by these conservative men who, again, I'm not talking about the total assholes out there. There's some blatant racists, there's some blatant like bad people out there that you're just never going to convince. But there's a lot of dudes in particular, dudes that fit the Joe Rogan mold, that are very gettable. They're actually, they want to talk. They want to talk about these things. They might have learned from some bad sources, but how does someone who's in the minority in a very masculine arena in terms of their politics, what would be your advice for trying to have that open door and be welcoming to our ideas without pushing people away? Because I feel like that's a thing that we struggle like across the board when left-wing men are in these right-wing conservative spaces. We kind of shell up, and we either shell up or we fight. It's like a fight or flight. It's one or the other, but there's a middle ground there that you can actually work with. What would be your advice to getting there?
The first thing that comes to mind is, so I have an answer, but I just want to mention it's not possible to cram in these types of scenarios. There's a reason why Jordan Peterson was so effective and Joe Rogan or Jogan, whoever we're talking about, so effective. It's because there's so much content and hours of them to become familiar in a parasocial way to other people. So that's like at a scale how that kind of thing happens. Obviously, people can become parasocial with someone in their more immediate life if they don't maybe interact with them much. But that aside, I think the most important for me is always the present moment, the interaction I'm having with you, the interaction I have with a student when it's occurring. If in jiu-jitsu, you know this, you can't make a lot of promises. This, I promise you, will work. It will work or it will not. And there can be poor execution and people can improve on it. But in jiu-jitsu, one of the reasons it's so impressive to people, it leaves that impression on them, is because it doesn't matter how much you resist initially, you will be overcome. And so if you talk to people about things in jiu-jitsu, it can help. But I think what really, really helps is to help other people win their battles. Don't make them win your battles for you or with you at first. Don't even bother with that. Find out what their battles are. There's a variety of ways to do it. There's direct inquiry, and there's just actually being interested in people. Find out what their battles are and help them win their battles, because they will remember how it felt for you to help them win. Some people, when they help you win, they berate you, and only kicking and screaming against your own resistance for something you said you wanted, do they help you succeed. Those are not good coaches.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm working with a kid comes in, right, and they're running around a lot, and everyone else wants to say, slow down, it's time for class. I don't say, slow down, it's time for class. I say to the kid who's running around, can you run even faster than that? Can you run and jump can you run and jump, and then on one leg we're going to hop, and now can you chase me? Can you catch me? I'm going to help you win the battle that you're currently in, because if I demand you fight another battle, I've already lost you. I'm going to help you win the battle you're on, and I'm going to do it in a way where I don't even think you can fail at it if we do it my way. To give you another example from jiu-jitsu, you know this, a lot of people in jiu-jitsu are very uncomfortable in the standing position. And the moment you ask them to do any sort of grip fighting or standing technique, they both stop and plant their feet every time they coordinate their hands, right? And as a wrestler, you know that this is not acceptable. Stance, motion, hand fighting, this all happen together. So what I tend to do is I create a no-fail drill where I have everyone put their hands out like they're going to play that game Hot Hands, you know, where you have your hands like this and then you slap on the top. And we're going to play hot hands with each other. And at first, we're going to stand still and do it in front of each other, so everyone knows the rules and everyone knows when we switch and things like this. But then we're going to walk around in our stance, and we're going to play hot hands. And you cannot win the game of hot hands if you stop walking around. And what I'm trying to do is, one, help you win a relevant battle, right? This is jiu-jitsu class. We're not just playing games. We're developing skills. This is hand-eye coordination, moving your feet in stance. But more of what I'm doing is I'm showing you and another uninitiated person, not you, but obviously two new people, that you can succeed your very first day in the very first thing I have you do. Because I always start with standing technique. Every class is standing technique. And so if I have a lot of new people, they're playing hot hands and walking around and laughing and having a good time. And all of a sudden they believe that they can be in jiu-jitsu class and actually participate and maybe not become a black belt today, but they're on some sort of path. And when people come to class, they came because they believe they can learn. People forget that. Like, we go to class as adults and pay money because we think we can learn those things, not because we're looking to be entertained, right? So you get people engaged with each other and with you in a successful endeavor, a very tiny battle that you created. I created the constraints. You know, you got to keep moving your feet. You got to play hot hands, and you're likely going to succeed. And now there's some buy-in with us where I can recommend now a little bit more of a sophisticated drill. But I always start with no fail methods of trying to help other people win their battles, because people will pick up on that. They will pick up that you're not opposing them or resisting them or even self-interested. You're really just engaging with them. And when you engage with people successfully, they become your allies, right? And you together grow into a new person together, right? I'm a new person after talking with you about this, and we're going to go into the world a little differently. But that is how you actually convince people of things over time. And the thing about it is it's got a curve to it. At the very beginning, it doesn't seem like it's doing anything. You're not really having an effect. But what people might not realize is once other people observe you being this way with a person, they will imitate it. And so now a blue belt comes to class, and I've got 5 white belts, and I show the drill to everyone, and the blue belt pairs up with the odd number, and they know what I'm doing. And now they are a teacher as well. And you see, like, it's the fucking golden rule. Do the thing so that if it propagated out into eternity, it would actually be productive. And here's the other part. You have to make the rules, and they are for you to manifest first and express and be beholden by before everyone else. And so the reason I bring this up is because when I teach a class, it's for white belts to black belts. So every class, white belts and black belts are going to learn something from this. So the constraints that I put on the lesson are always, would I also want to be in this class doing this? I'll never have someone do a drill that I wouldn't love to partner up and do with you because I know it's good for me to develop. I'll never have you do a lesson on a technique that I'll say, This sometimes it's like it's a pretty low percentage. Like, okay, we got other stuff to focus on. Let's focus on high percentage. Okay, I'm not here to waste your time. You got other things you can do. You're not going to be doing jumping jacks and push-ups in my class for extended periods of time. We're here to work on skills, right? When you take people seriously, actually take people seriously about the things they want to do, the skills they want to develop, and you help them win the battles that they're trying to fight, and you do it in a way where they don't feel like a loser that somehow won a battle, but they feel like a winner that can win additional tougher battles, they'll be your allies. People want allies that help them do that.
I think that's a really interesting way to put it, because you spoke a lot about jiu-jitsu there and how you teach jiu-jitsu in that way. And I imagine there might be some people who are like, okay, but how does that apply to talking to a person? And it actually does line up with how I always try to communicate with people who are right-leaning or right-wingers when I want to actually engage and build trust and learning and understanding with them, because you kind of do have to let them win some things. If you just go in and start hammering them, if you try and fight on your grounds, on like the things that you can win, and we all have those things, right? And we all gravitate towards those because we want to win, especially in a gym setting. You don't want to lose. You have this natural competitive edge. But if you go into jiu-jitsu, you go into really anything that you're trying to learn, and you're just trying to win every single rep, you're actually not going to learn. You're going to learn very slowly, at least, because you need to be willing to fail in order to learn. And so when I'm talking with someone on the right, I will often gravitate towards the areas I know I can deliver them wins on and find points of agreement for. It's like, yeah, a lot of times especially for like, the lower information conservatives, again, not to say all conservatives are low information, but there's a lot of people who don't know shit, right? Especially in America, a lot of people who don't really follow politics, and they're basically vibes checking. They're doing mimicry, like you said, and they're like, bro, like, yeah, I see you're saying these bad things about Trump, but like, bro, look at fucking Biden, bro. Like, he's this old piece of shit. He couldn't even talk. How could you? I don't give a shit about what Trump says. He can say something, and I'll be like, yeah, bro, you're right. I fucking hate Biden too. You are 100,000% right. And I can have that conversation, and we can bash Biden for all of the valid criticisms of Joe Biden to build that trust, build that rapport. If you're someone who can't criticize Joe Biden, well, you got learning to do too here, bro. But again, I think most of the people who watch this show, we criticize Democrats all the fucking time. We probably hate them more than the Republicans do, So like that's one way that I've always found to be a real easy button in terms of giving. Again, if you actually want to build rapport and change minds, real easy button. Bashing the Dems they hate for the things that they deserve valid criticism for, and then always trying to push them back in the right direction. If they start going, into an area where, hey, I can't agree with that, they start going into anti-trans bigotry or something. It's validate the feeling that they have that's driving it, or engage with them on a normal level. I always say, like, for people who are confused about the difference between sex and gender, I say things like, yo, what were you doing on Sunday? I was drinking beer, watching football with my friends. Make you feel manly? Like, did you feel manly hanging out with your boys, drinking beer, watching football? He's like, yeah, no, I did. Yeah. Would you have felt as manly if you were drinking wine and hanging out with, a bunch of chicks watching The Bachelor? It's like, no, that's feminine. It's like, okay, but like, does that have anything to do with your genitals? No, it's gender. It's how we're performing it. And that's totally okay. It's totally, I as left wing as they come. And I love drinking beer and watching football because it makes me feel like a man. Stereotypical as shit. I don't give a shit. Makes me happy. And that's the same thing I want everyone to feel, even if people don't feel that way. And I have gotten right-wingers on board with that line of reasoning because I didn't just be in attack mode. I validated how they feel and then tried to deliver that empathy onto others. And I feel like that's the same thing as playing in hot hands, as you called it. I don't even know. Like, I never heard hot hands, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't know if I ever had a name in it. But no, that is.
Real quick. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, as you were speaking, I was noticing because as we're recording this, I'm assuming people sometimes watch and sometimes listen in some combination of, we have different backgrounds behind us. And if I were to sit here and describe you, you have the poster, I think that's Michael Jackson on the wall, and I see there's a darker curtain on one side, et cetera, et cetera, and I'm talking about, I'm accurately describing your background. But if you describe my background, I have a very cool Elden Ring helmet behind me. It's very cool, right? And you're accurately describing that one as well. If we start to argue about the merits of our various backgrounds, we might not realize we're actually talking about backgrounds, but two different backgrounds. And when I talk to people, I spend most of the time, I think, making sure our perspectives align. So I turn or you turn, right? And so we're aligned in our perspectives. And then I spend a lot of time talking about what I observe in that landscape or scenery. Then I start talking about what are maybe the ramifications and implications of some of the more preposterous ideas that I disagree with and some of the absurd things that come from that. So for example, one that often comes up is Second Amendment and things like this. And I just like to make jokes about like, man, I am a very big Second Amendment person and I want to have a missile guidance system on my roof that's solar. But you see there's an absurdism in there. And once somebody's like, oh yeah, like there are some maybe limits that would be okay. I just don't know what they are. I think also that seed of doubt is quite useful for opening up discussions when it comes from the other person, especially when, it's tough to, as you were saying, attack someone into agreeing with you, but it's almost inevitable for someone to accept an idea that they thought they came up with. Right. Yeah. And almost every really good lesson feels like you knew everything in it the whole time. Right. It's I'm learning, but this is making enough sense piece by piece, sentence by sentence, that I've been guided somewhere that seemed so familiar by the time I arrived.
Yeah.
I think that's where the patience and the almost religious ritual has to come in, where I'm just going to do this regularly. I'm just going to post something every day about what I think about whatever I'm currently experiencing in the moment when I write it. It might be about my dog and how pleasant that is. It might be about something that's really bothering me. Politically, it might be a thought about jiu-jitsu that I just was like, I want to write this down because I want to search later and find it. And I'm gonna keep doing that. And people will find their perspective somewhere in mine. They'll find something. Like I like to post about things that are related to music, because I think when you like the same music as somebody, you instantly connect. Music unifies people like jiu-jitsu does, and kind of like something like video games can, or really anything that you are into that you do with other people, that other people from different backgrounds can get involved in, right? You start to find slivers of life that overlap with each other. And from that sliver of life, you can grow so much common ground. But you cannot grow common ground from difference that you find to be repulsive or disgusting. So I don't start with that. And jiu-jitsu is so beautiful because I'm usually in a position where I'm leading a class and I get to be the primary mover. I get to say, we're going to do this. I'm going to show you that I don't need you to be the best in the world, and I don't need to be the best in the world. I just need you to enjoy engaging on this. And eventually over time, some of the slivers of life that overlap with each other and our interests will start to converge, and we'll open up to each other and we'll learn about each other. And that approach, I think, when they find out that, oh, he's like a progressive guy, I wouldn't have thought that. I'm like, why would you have? Why would you have thought that? You know what I mean? Like, that's just how maybe we should be in society, kind of thing. I'm not saying I got it perfectly right or anything, but I'm saying that the way I like to learn about my mistakes with other people is not to have them point out things I should regret. I like to realize, you learned that lesson. I don't want to learn that lesson through experience. I'm glad you told me about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. And that is the way that we build community. That is the way we connect with other people. And interesting to talk about building community and connecting with other people, given our current political environment and all of the bullshit that is going on. And I'm specifically talking about the violence. And, when we're doing jiu-jitsu, we're doing combat sports, it's violent, right? But it's pretend violence. It's an outlet for that violence. And it also does help us build community with one another. You build a brotherhood, you build a connection with other human beings. And there is something that I've noticed about a lot of the recent, incidents of political violence, especially the high-level killings that have gotten a lot of attention between what happened. Shit, it was yesterday. Yesterday in Dallas with the man opening fire on the ICE facility. What happened a few weeks ago with Charlie Kirk. What happened back at the end of last year? I think it was the end of last year, or it was January, something with Luigi Mangione. And there is something that I did very much notice connects these three incidents and a lot of incidents of violence in general. It's a lot of men. Men commit most of the violence in this country. I don't think anyone's going to argue with me on that one. It's a lot of white men. Now, white men aren't more prone to violence in general, but they do seem to be more prone to these acts of mass public violence. If you look at it statistically, white men are way overrepresented when it comes to mass shootings, when it comes to acts like this. And there's a third little piece here that I feel like connects all three, and that's nihilism. And there's a lot of people trying to point fingers. Oh, this guy was left wing. Oh, this guy was right wing. And I don't think that really describes any of those three people we talked about. Luigi, at this point, we definitely know his politics were all the fuck over the place. He had some left wing ideas. He had some right wing ideas. But in general, he was just pissed off about the state of the world. In his particular case, pissed off about healthcare and how fucked up that is in this country. Again, we have our different ideas for how to fix it, but I think most people feel like healthcare is fucked up in this country. You look at the Tyler Robinson, the Charlie Kirk shooter. He's thrown out a lot of, let's call them 4chan-y memes on the bullets. He very much seems to be in that irony-pilled on hyper online culture. We came out today reporting from Ken Klippenstein that the shooter in Dallas, he was an avid 4chaner. His friends described him as that dark sense of humor, making rape jokes in their comment section, that nihilistic white young male. All the way back, you're talking, philosophers with Rene Girard, one of his contemporaries, Nietzsche. That's his cup of tea, and and he speaks to that type of person in particular, the young white male who feels lost, who doesn't have the sense of community, who doesn't have a sense of connection to other people, and a couple bad days in their lives go a certain way. They have access to some guns that can kill a lot of people very quickly and very easily, and you end up with these kinds of events when you mix all of those things together. Add that in with the rising political tensions and rhetoric that we've talked about, you mentioned earlier, the politics of aggression and othering others. That is what it results in, what we have here today. So kind of just, I know you mentioned you didn't know too much about the Dallas shooting, but are you also kind of seeing these through lines when it comes to these, mass violence events, especially when they are on the political spectrum?
Yeah, there's a few thoughts. One is I get a sense that people are much more disenfranchised than they have a sentiment, I should say. They have a sentiment of being more disenfranchised than they are, even accounting for the fact that they know they're disenfranchised. So people have a sense that voting doesn't matter or make a difference. Let's just start with something like that. And then there's a second layer where if it did make a difference, the politicians are corrupt, and so they won't make a difference. And when you have things like that, where the method of redress is supposed to be political and voting, and it doesn't seem to be effective for people that would like to have their lives change and improve, you see people resorting to more extreme methods and tactics to have a voice when they feel voiceless. I don't think this is acceptable, but I think this is part of what is occurring. I think that there's something interesting from the right, which is a notion of, both sides have these, but on the right, there's a lot of talk about individual responsibility. And on the left, there's a lot of talk about how your environment shapes a lot of who you are as an individual. And I think both of these are true. And like many things, it's rarely one thing. It's usually many things explain what is occurring or what we're observing. And I think that on one side, it doesn't actually matter what side someone comes from when they commit heinous acts of violence, right? People will say, well, when it's political, it does. It's like, no, it still does not, because the politics are there to provide the direction for the government, and the government is supposed to contain violence. It's supposed to use violence, to contain violence, restrain it, right? So the government's supposed to contain violence, both have it and minimize it. We are not supposed to engage in that. And that's sort of the trade-off that we're supposed to make in our social contract, right? We outsource our violence to the government to hopefully enforce just laws in some way. What happens though is when somebody is a shooter, if we point to their environment, what are the two environments that tend to exist? One of them is one where we generally want stricter gun laws. We generally want people to have housing, education, food, be cared for, not have abusive childhoods, be educated, raised in a home, things like this. These are all wonderful things. On the other side, there's often a strong gun culture. And guns are very emphasized. They're treated more, they're treated with like sacred objects, like someone would treat an iPhone when it first came out. They take family photos holding assault rifles. When I think about the types of solutions available to me, I tend to think about the things that I've interacted with. When I am very frustrated with the world, if every single weekend I've shot guns at things, and this is a habit I've made, it's not that this will make me shoot someone, but hammer and nail type of thing, right? When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like nails, right? When all you got is guns and bullets, and your parents don't tend to you, and you feel forgotten in the corner of an internet, the way you lash out is with a gun. But you probably were going to lash out because of your environment in some way. So it can be that both are involved in many ways. On the one hand, we should have much stricter gun laws in many ways, and the details of that should be worked out in public policy. Because, and also though, an environment of gun culture and lauding and lionizing and literally shooting targets of political opponents on video, and these are all, as we've now discussed, very understandable how they promote violence if you understand modeling, mimesis, any type of imitation at all. And it's also why, well, we can maybe return to that idea, but I think that to summarize, individual responsibility. It doesn't matter who the shooter is. Acts of violence are always heinous unless they occur in the very small consensual area of martial arts or something like this. And the purpose of government is supposed to be to contain all of that violence. At the same time, the environment that people are in will strongly determine whether or not they have a propensity for violence because they grow up very poor and are pointed towards crime in many ways, or they grow up in a culture where guns are lauded as the cause and cure to every problem. Like I feel like I'm in an episode of The Simpsons where Homer gets a gun and he shoots the TV off and he shoots the mail or shoots the door to open the door. Like it's like, what do you think someone's going to do when they are so frustrated with like they are not taught about how to peacefully converse and agree with people you disagree with, because you take them to some church where they cannot question anything for an hour or two every week, and then they're taught to use guns every single weekend. Like it's not I'm not Sherlock Holmes, but I feel like I've cracked the case. Like it's not a mystery why people would think this is the thing to do, but they can't say that because the right has to be a side of individual responsibility. So when they say, oh, it's the individual, what was that individual's political leaning? Notice what's trying to occur there. It's a sleight of hand. What is the environment that they were raised in? Because if they're right wing, well, it's just the shooter. That person's crazy. That guy, it's a mental health issue. That's where that comes from, if you actually think about it. That guy's crazy. Us right wingers, we're so safe with guns, even though like all the gun violence out there, we're so safe with guns. But then on the other side, like let's say a shooter was left wing. The left wing, if they don't have any notion of like, yeah, that's kind of like what a psychopath does. But they're like everything's environment. It's like, okay, I guess we had to take that on board. It's like, no, don't play their stupid game. Like, we are all individuals influenced by our surroundings. And there are extreme things that despite surroundings, we literally have laws that don't allow for us to do this because it degenerates into complete chaos in society. Now that is a fine position for me to have. There's nothing hypocritical or contradictory in it as a progressive. But the issue, I think, is that you can't have that position on the right as it currently stands with the admiration of guns and the gun culture and the no questioning and the notion of it has to be individual responsibility. I think all of those things do tie together in a sort of vat of bad ideas that's very hard to peel apart once it melts together.
When it comes to guns, the guns is a very interesting thing because it horseshoes a little bit, where you get, right wingers are typically considered to be the gun people, right? But if you go far enough on the left, you'll actually see a lot of people on farther parts of the left are like, oh no, the Second Amendment is very important. We need to make sure that minority groups are able to arm themselves to defend themselves against the oppressive government, which we've had for the vast majority of our country's existence, and it's actually a place where there can be agreement. And what I always say when it comes to guns, I say a couple things. One, if you want to have a bunch of guns, that's okay, but let's treat them with the respect and that they deserve. I always say it is a societal problem that we can fix in a similar way we fixed smoking, right? I don't want to go around taking people's guns away. I think that's very bad for the government to do. I think it's not going to be effective because prohibition doesn't work. And I think that it's just going to be incredibly costly and not really work at the end of the day. But if we can educate people about what guns are, what they should be used for, that, hey, if you own a gun, you're more likely to be killed or kill yourself. And people go, what you said with the individual responsibility thing, they always said to me, oh, well, that it doesn't, the half of gun deaths are suicides. That doesn't really count. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Because we know that suicides, just like most violent crimes, they are time and place. People who commit suicide and fail can be taken out of that environment and they no longer want to commit suicide. It's not something that is a constant thing. It often is for a moment they get pushed over the line. And if they have a very quick and easy way to end it with the press of a button, they're going to be more likely to succeed and end up killing themselves than if, I don't know, they had to slit their wrists or take a bunch of medication that isn't going to have as high a fatality rate or whatever. They have to unlock the safe and they have to remember the password and all of these things. They can calm down, right? And so there's a lot of common sense things that we can do keeping guns without having, as you said, this gun culture where we're glorifying them. They're just lying around. They're hung up on the wall, loaded. These are the things that make the violence easier to commit and more deadly when it is committed, that we need to tamper down. We don't need to take all the guns away, but we need to come to better understanding of what they are and what their place needs to be in society. And that happens from talking like this, from having actual open communication about it and not just screaming at each other. Because I feel like what a lot of the right wingers often hear is, we're taking your guns away. Every time gun violence is brought up, they're like, I don't want to give up my guns. Like, you don't have to give up your gun, but let's have a genuine conversation about why it's easier to get and operate a gun than it is to get and operate a car. That doesn't make sense to me. Like, why should I have to have insurance for my car but not my gun? That doesn't make. Why is there a test? Why do I have to take have training with my car, but we don't require any sort of training in order to acquire a gun? These are all things that I think most Americans can agree on if we can just drop this facade of it's either take all the guns away or, gun palooza, right? And that kind of swings back in with the violence and the violent rhetoric of one of the reasons that we're seeing such deadly violence rise. A is the rhetoric, but B is also we have a gun culture. We have a culture of violence. We have a very, very violent country, and it's gotten a lot better. Even in my lifetime and your lifetime, it's gotten significantly better. If you look at violent crime stats in the 90s and compare them to today, it's night and day, but it still isn't great. So I guess the follow-up question therein is,
only women should have guns.
well, honestly, that probably was, well, you keep in the house, only the woman knows the code of the safe, and that
well, okay, now you're a thinker. Okay, you're a philosophy guy. I can see. I might be losing you for a moment. Looks like there's a little lag maybe on one of our ends. Can you hear me okay? You hear me okay?
There we go, Tim. I might have lost you for a second there. Sorry, as you were saying before, before I just dropped connection there.
I'm pretty sure there was some sort of glitch. I say that kind of in jest, but the philosophy of gun ownership and things related to it, an equalizer, a force vector, something that allows for a person to live in the reality of violence, but not only be a victim of it. That's something I can actually get behind. I think that when I say only women should have guns, I'm like, because most of the people that are going to attack them can be stopped with a gun. I'm one of them. I'm not going to be attacking anyone, so I don't mind. I think that the problem with gun culture is the culture of violence as solutions for everything. And what's the best form of, what's the most efficient, not best, the best is martial arts. What's the most efficient form of violence? Well, to kill someone with a gun or like a bomb or something like this. And so it's very hard to disarm people without disarming them. And I think that we don't actively disarm each other, and because we don't actively disarm ourselves. Because in American culture, there's a rugged frontier mentality where my ability to sustain myself and be strong and independent is essentially what it is to be an American and go out on the frontier and to be able to harsh the rugged terrain or whatever it is. But the thing is, what gun culture acknowledges is that the largest threat to human beings is other human beings. Now, if we were actually recognized, it would be disease, it would be heart disease, it would be things like this that we could actually unify humans behind and try to overcome. But when people say, I need a gun, it's always because of someone else who may or may not have a gun. And until you address that potential, there's always a reasonable position to take for why someone should have a gun. I think if someone lives alone and they are scared of being attacked by someone who's insane, them having a gun, it makes sense if they fear for their life. It also demonstrates a society that's so large that perhaps people don't feel attended to by their local law enforcement, or they feel it is not reliable, or they feel it is untrustworthy for a number of reasons, and therefore they need to protect themselves with a gun. I think a lot of times I'm actually sometimes more disturbed by the people that are on the left that are very, very pro-gun, because I have a sense that sometimes they only see guns as a solution, similar to how I think some very extreme right-wing people see it. Where, the only good Nazis are dead ones. I'm like, that, if they're, but also I would prefer they change their mind. Honestly, like if I could take all the Nazis and have them change their mind and be like, oh, that's actually not based at all, it's very cringe, then maybe they could, but I think that the pro-gun must have a gun culture comes from an understandable threat of I'm in a gun culture. And we're in a chicken and the egg scenario where you're never going to get the people to disarm who feel that they would be the victims of having been disarmed. It's a very tough knot to untie. I don't think that the solution is to start with a heavy-handed pulling away of guns or anything like that. But as you said, I do think that culture very strongly influences us. And I think that actually the UFC is actually in a position where it could be something that reduced gun violence by promoting something. MMA could be so like there's brain damage. Okay. Like, let's just imagine a world for a moment that doesn't exist, just to fantasize. That could be such a productive part of society where young men or young women can look up to people who have achieved something physically, mentally, competing against other people that are very good at something, against intelligent resistance. They gain the admiration and respect of their peers. And, this happens in jiu-jitsu without the brain damage to a lesser extent. But
you just explain why I stick with jiu-jitsu and don't get into
MMA. And I'm like, instead of building up a culture of, hey, this person is so potentially maximally violent, but is very respectful, as someone we both listen to would say, Jordan Peterson. Instead, it became, look at the theatricality of this violence and look at how much they actually hate each other. And it's like, they trained them to hate each other, which disgusts me. I'm like, those people are not like that. I know some of those people. They aren't like this, and you're making them this way. Like, that is the worst thing. And like, then they're successful because of that. And they think their model's wrong. And I'm like, you're literally poisoning the role models that you could have. And I'm like, man, don't be surprised by gun violence when you tell people that, like, being peaceful but expressing violence is not it. You must be angry and only violence. And whatever means you have, maybe you're a skilled fighter or maybe you're not. So what do you have if you're not a skilled fighter? What do you have at your parents? Like, you see what I mean? Like, it's poison that is pouring into people's food right in front of them. But they don't understand it because they don't understand what the poison looks like. It doesn't look like a good argument. It doesn't look like somebody saying, bro, you have to use a gun and take revenge on people. Like no, it looks like a model that supports violence as the solution for everything and bullying for everything. Dana White and Donald Trump, hard to tell apart a lot of times, hard to tell them apart. But they both are bullies who savor in the cruelty of violence, never in the technical mastery of a skill. And so when you push that out to millions of people, and they have guns in their closet, and they're not trained fighters, but they see the glorification of violence and that you've lionized these people for being warriors and taking what they want and not letting anything stop them. And you can do anything you want, if you commit to it, if you're willing to commit your life to it. Like, that's crazy talk. I feel like a crazy person just saying that right now. But the alternative could be so beautiful. Like, what in Pride had its own problems in Japan. But one of the things you notice about Pride, the audience was silent. And when something technical happened, they applauded. And I'm not saying like, oh, this culture is better than, I'm saying that we're human beings. We can learn behaviors and we can learn to be the way we want to be. But it's very tough for us to just do it on our own. We usually have to have a model to start with. We have to have something to copy until it's our own. When I teach someone jiu-jitsu, I usually sound like someone else that I liked teaching, and then eventually becomes my own language and it becomes my own expression. You know this, yeah? And I think the same thing is true, and it's the reason I came on Threads in the first place. Was I was like, look, I have said this to a number of people and talked to a number of people about this, and I think I've had a pretty good effect in the like 12 years I ran that school, you know, but I have to, it's very uncomfortable for me, but I have to go more to where people are, because this is not going to stop and change itself, you know? So there are other models out there, but there is a momentum in another direction, you know? But people don't like it, and they're starting to see what happens with it.
Yeah.
So they want something different, you know? And
I mean, it is that's something different. I think you were kind of alluding to it there, is that people do, especially men in particular, they gravitate to who they view as strong. You know, like you want to be in the crew with the strongest guys. You know, you want because it protects you. If you follow someone who is going to be able to provide and get you the things you want, you want to hype that person up, and that, you know, that's where tribalism comes in and everything. And something with guns, they kind of negate strength. You know, we go on a mat together, and you kick my fucking ass, and you are stronger than me, and I know that, and I want to learn from you, so I will willingly get on that mat and allow my ass to be kicked, so you can show me all the ways that I can learn and improve. And that is how you cultivate true strength. But if I wanted to just be stronger than you, I could pull out a gun and shoot you in the head. That makes me, I guess, tougher because I'm alive, but I didn't learn anything. I didn't actually get stronger. I cheated. I took the easy way out. And that is something that I often like kind of point to with the gun culture people, especially the people who subscribe to those very masculine, red meat, strength over everything sort of mentalities. Your Nietzsche's of the world, who rejected things like Christianity because they taught you to have mercy on the weak. And he was like, no, we have to be the strongest survive. We're a warrior culture. We're the Viltrumites, if you're an Invincible fan, right? And I always say the strongest thing is forgiveness, because only the strong can forgive. Only the strong can be gentle. The weak, they have to scrounge it out. They have to claw and fight. It's why you see, look at any fucking resistance movement of oppressed people throughout history that gets very fucking bloody violent, because they have to. The path of strength is nonviolence, because when you walk with that big stick, when you know that you can use the violence if you need to, you are open to take other pathways that are better. And that's, I definitely think, a bridge that we can make for people of, hey, don't go down that path of violence, because that's the weakness. That's how we all make each other weaker. Let's come together. We're still going to have conflict. If you're going to be a Nazi, I'm still going to like not like you. I'm still going to resist you hard fucking core. But again, is what most of the people on the left are saying about Charlie Kirk. You know, I didn't fucking like the guy. I don't think the world is a better place because of what he did in it. But killing him as an act of political violence makes the world a worse place than he ever could have with just his words. And that's something that needs to be understood. If you want to be strong, be nonviolent. Be as strong as you fucking can. Go to jiu-jitsu, go do MMA, go do whatever. Be the toughest guy you fucking know. But the strength is knowing how to not use that strength and how to, like you said earlier, use what you know, use your strength to teach other people to be stronger. And then eventually they can make you stronger. And then we're all stronger. If we're all going around killing each other, we're all weaker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I obviously I agree with that. I think that like, I think for example, in jujitsu, when you first start off and everyone is just destroying you, and then the day you get your first submission, you always remember, oh, it was a guillotine or whatever, whatever it is. And so you go from what seemed like a failure to what seemed like a success, and you want to recreate this success, and you want to submit more people, and so you do, and you get better. And as you keep getting better, you can submit more, and you eventually get to a point where every class, every lesson, you're able to submit everyone. And but then someone comes in and you can submit them, but they're kind of a terror to some of your junior students that are actually their size. And maybe I'm bigger than them too. So me smashing this student is not satisfying for anyone in any way, and is not productive. It doesn't teach my students anything at all. The real satisfying part about strength is when it's off the table, right? When it's no longer, am I going to bully you better than you bully me? But like, I'm the only one who can play the bully card, and it never gets played. And it's kind of a silly thing to engage with, because it just admits so much short-sightedness on our part to be concerned with who's going to beat the other person up. Like, it would never come to that. But that demonstrates a failure of our greater faculties to come to that. What actually we should do is to recognize that strength, as people will say, strength is a skill. The use of leverage is a skill. Being strong is learned. It's not inherent. It's not something that is in a person. It's something you can have, or it's something that you can lose if you lose practice with what it means to be strong, and you turn that strength into bullying. But strength is a skill, how you protect people so that they don't feel helpless. Because it's possible to try and be a strong person and have a savior complex. Like, I have all your solutions and you should, but that's not what strength is either. Strength is knowing that you also are, even though you're strong, are still very imperfect and still have a lot to learn. And that actually strength is engaging with people so that they become strong and win the battles they need to win, not win the battles that you think they should be fighting. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Again, it's like people, like in jiu-jitsu, sometimes when I'm teaching, I'll teach a grip or a position, and I'll have students do it, and I'll do it to them. But one of the things I'm always asking is, did you feel the strength of that technique or the grip? Not did it work and they sort of fell over because your partner was being compliant or whatever, but did you feel how you could tell you were strong there? Like when you're on a bike, you can tell when you're falling or not. And I want everyone before the end of the day to be like, yeah, I could feel the strength of that technique, because your nervous system will carve pathways to make it easier to return to that shape with your body by having success once. Now, it might take you 100 repetitions to get that one, but then it takes you one, like a day to keep it, or one a week to keep it, because your nervous system organizes really, really well. And so I think that when you show people this and you say, look, the strength was something that was already in you, your skeleton you've had your whole life, you just learned to use it. All the other strength is also there. It doesn't take me. I'm just the person that's here with you at this point in your life, but it could be anybody. That strength is in you, and it's something you can learn. But the unfortunate thing is, I think a lot of times the way people are raised, especially this can happen very commonly in a religious background, where people have very fixed attitudes about their own capabilities and their own ability to learn. They don't see themselves as a person that's always learning in life. And I think that when you show people, hey, you're an adult who maybe was out of school for a long time, you go to a job all the time, but now you're coming in and you're learning something again. And don't forget, you can also be doing this in other parts of your life, and it would be admirable to do. It would not be a sign of arrested development. It would not be a sign of failure for you to begin now. I know 10 years is going to pass in 10 years, and that time will pass anyway. And you could have 10 years of doing something that you'll really like yourself for having started. Or you could have 10 years of being like, man, I wish it wasn't so hard on myself. And, I could have started this thing, and I was like, I'll just be that person. I'll just tell you that wisdom that you're going to have anyway. I'll just help confer it to you now. And later on, maybe you're like, man, that guy was a good teacher. He kind of knew something. And that's what I want, because then people will want to work with me, But I think what I try to keep in mind is always just align your perspectives. You have your background, I have mine. Let's make sure we're talking about the same background. Then let me find out in your background, what are the battles that really matter to you? And how are you experiencing them as winning and losing right now? What does that seem like to you? Is there any battle I can help you win? Even if it's a really small one, it doesn't matter the size of the battle. It matters that you had an ally for it. And then once we do that and we reciprocate and we go for it, then we have a few allies and we see, hey, we're not so alone. And when we realize we're not alone, we're like, we've got models to copy and we've got people that need something to imitate. Let's get started. You know what I mean?
And that is a great piece of wisdom to end this on. So with that, I will say, thank you guys for watching The Left Wing. This has been another excellent episode. TJ isn't here, so we got to talk about some nerdy jiu-jitsu shit, and that was wonderful for me. If you guys enjoyed our guest today, Tim, where can people find you?
I have Threads, Instagram, and YouTube. You can find me at Timothy Lee Peterson. It's just all spelled out, and that's where I am.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys very much once again for being here. Next week, we will be back on Tuesday. We will not have a Thursday show because I'm getting married on Friday. And me and TJ will be together for that. He'll be there. So keep an eye out on our personal pages for some in-person content for the first time ever. But thank you guys very much, and we'll see you next time.